Boys podcast powered by Carolina Electrical Services. For all your electrical needs, call 704-320-7357, and Jacob will take care of those for you. Josh and Anthony, here as always, and today we're going to break down the opening round win for Carolina over Iona and look ahead to tomorrow's matchup with Washington in the round of 32. So, buddy, yet last night Carolina earned a 88-73 win. It wasn't the cleanest game, but at this time of year, it's all about winning and advancing. That's what it is.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a lot about the fact that the 16 seeds outside of Fairleigh Dickinson played very well for the most part in the first round. And, you know, I think part of that is because last year you had UMBC's win, not even win, they actually manhandled Virginia throughout most of that game. So I think everybody, you know, the 16 seeds from now on, I'm not saying that we'll see that many upsets. I think once in a great while, you'll see a 16 upset of one. But they're always going to come out with that mindset of, hey, you know, it's been done now. So it's not really impossible. It's you can make it happen if you just put in the type of effort. And really in the first half, I thought that was what Iona was doing. They were the team that was really just showing more want to. Part of it was that they were knocking down everything that they were looking at from the outside. And, you know, the other part of it was I think Carolina kind of, you know, they were struggling shooting the ball. I don't know if that was really an effort thing, although Roy Williams said he didn't like the effort of his team, and you're going to believe the head coach more than anybody else. But Carolina continued to struggle from the field in the first half. Now, they were much better in the second half, but we've seen that throughout really the second half of the season in ACC conference play and then on into the ACC tournament and here starting the NCAA tournament. So you wonder whether that shooting struggles, those shooting struggles, whether or not that'll end up catching up to Carolina at some point. It definitely caught up to them a little bit in that first half, but really Carolina was just the more talented team, the deeper team, and Iona wasn't going to shoot as well as they did in the first half. I think everybody knew that, and they didn't shoot as well as they did in the first half. Carolina didn't shoot as bad as they did in the first half, and the fact that they dominated on the glass I think definitely helped. So I'm not going to say that it was completely expected, but at the same time, Iona is an experienced team. They have a really good head coach in Tim Cluse, and they're a team that's been to the NCAA tournament now 4 straight seasons. Wouldn't expect anything different next year. And, you know, they had a lot of talented guys. Carolina's just got to realize that, I mean, and Luke said it in the post-game press conference with Scott Van Pelt that went off the rails because the guys decided they were going to have a little bit of fun, which was cool to see. But, you know, he said, you know, we just have to realize that, you know, if we lose, it's over. So that's the mindset that we have to take going into every game. He's like, you know, I think we had that mindset going into the game, but we kind of let it slip there a little bit in the first half. And, you know, Roy kind of got us back on track and told us, you know, look, if you lose tonight, you go home. So I think that's kind of the, you know, maybe the mindset was a little bit off because they were playing a 16 seed, but I think for the most part, that second half was exactly what we were looking for from this Carolina team.
Yeah, I really thought the first 20 minutes, I don't know if it was the late start or whatever, we just didn't seem to be fully engaged into the game and the meaning of, okay, you know, like you said, we lose, we go home. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, a lot of it also, I think you got to give Iona credit. They came out, they were ready to play, and they get 10 threes. And, I mean, you know, Twitter made it out like we weren't defending them. 7 of those 10 threes they made in the first half were contested threes. Like, they were just being tough enough to make shots, and Carolina wasn't. But I also thought, and I mentioned this to you pre-conversation of the podcast, and when I talked to my dad about the game, I thought trailing at halftime was a good wake-up call because you had the layoff in between the Duke games. So, you know, there could have been a hangover from that. So there's always that the emotional hangover to losing to your rival in that rivalry. But also just a good chance for, even though we're an older team, a veteran team, for Roy Williams to say, hey, you know, you keep playing like this, you're going to go home. We saw it in 2016 in the opening round game against Florida Gulf Coast. We saw, you know, in 2019 or 2018 2009 against LSU, where even though that was a second-round game, even with older teams, if you're not ready to play, no matter how much talent you have, the season could be over. And I thought the guys just responded big time in the second half. They're going to need to shoot it a lot better tomorrow, because if not, there's a better chance to get upset. But if they rebound the way they rebounded the ball, then, that can always offset a bad shooting night. When you double up an opponent, I know Iona is smaller and they don't have the digs, but they doubled them up on the rebounds. That's outrageous in a tournament game, and that's really what kept them in the game in the first half and allowed them to pull away for a comfortable win in the second.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and especially tomorrow with the fact that Mike Hopkins was a guy that was under Jim Boeheim for a while, and they're going to run the zone, the 2-3 zone, so they're going to try to take away the inside. Believe me, they've watched this Carolina team. They know that when we're getting inside and able to finish at the rim, which was something that it was a little bit frustrating for me in the first half, especially for Luke and Garrison. Both guys struggled inside. I thought there were also a couple of shots that Nas little missed at the rim, which, I was talking to Sam Doughton through Twitter at halftime, one of my guys from the Argyle Report, who does a fantastic job, and he said, really, can you really, have any beef with Nazir? And I understand. 4 of 7, he hit some clutch shots there for sure. But there were 2 at the rim that would have been, that I thought, probably should have gone down. And, of course, not all of them are going to go down. But in that first half, I feel like everybody was just a little bit frustrated with the fact that we were getting inside, but we just weren't finishing. That changed in the second half. One of the other things that I really liked, and Roy brought this up as well when they were coming back out of the tunnel from halftime, and he was doing the interview for Turner Sports, he said right out, this team has slowed the pace down, and this is not something that they usually do. They're not a team that runs a slow offense. They're always an up-tempo team, but being that they were a 16 seed, I think also being that they've been in the tournament for 4 straight years, but they've never upset anybody, despite being a team that a lot of people thought would be able to upset one because of their speed. I think maybe they changed their game just a little bit once they got into this NCAA tournament. Maybe it was a different mindset. In the first half, that slower tempo really hurt Carolina. Carolina picked it up in the second half, and that's when you started to see everything change. It was a different Carolina team in that second half. And Roy also said it in the postgame. He said, Cam Johnson, he hit that one shot, and then from that point on, Carolina really just took over. And I couldn't agree more. I think that was the wake-up call for them. Iona hit their first 3 of the second half, and you got to hand it to Ricky McGill. That kid was on the entire night. But after that, Iona didn't hit another 3-point shot the rest of the game until it was garbage time. So Carolina really did a fantastic job. And you brought up the fact that most of the threes were guarded. I really didn't have that much of an issue with how Carolina was guarding the 3-point line. I really thought for the most part they did a pretty good job of protecting the 3-point line. The issue was that Iona was just playing that well. Like you said, there were a couple that, if you were defending it as a player, me as a fan would be angry at you. And, I think maybe even Roy Williams would say, hey, look, if he's going to take that shot, you let him take that shot, because I don't need you picking up a foul that far from the basket and potentially making it a 4-point play, or putting yourself in foul trouble and taking yourself out of a game that, we might need you for late if this game does stay close. So, I know a lot of people are probably going to look into this and freak out just a little bit. I think that the Florida Gulf Coast game is a fantastic comparison, because that team in 2016, I think this team has loftier expectations than that team did. But at the same time, I think that, they got off to that slow start. And to me, I don't think it defines what this team's going to be. Now, the second-round game, we know that they've struggled in second-round games before, so I'm interested to see, especially in that first half, because now they're going from playing at 9:20-ish, I don't even remember the actual time that the game tipped off, to playing at 2:40-ish, probably more towards 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but still, that's the second tip of the day tomorrow, as opposed to being one of the last tips of the day the first day. So it's a pretty quick turnaround. It'll be interesting to see what type of energy level the guys come out with.
Yeah. I'm going to speak really quick about Nazir Little. I thought it was big for him to have that kind of performance. We're going to need him to be productive, and it's always seemed like when he has one performance that's really, really good, he's been able to back that up. If this team's going to make a 5-4 and maybe potentially cut down the nets, he's going to have to be giving us, 8-6 or 10-8, or some nights. Last night he gave us 19. We needed his scoring because the three-point shot went in there early, and we weren't finishing at the rim. And also, I'm with you. I thought the three that Cam hit to come out to start the second half was a great play designed by Roy Williams to get a flare screen to free him up. He got an open look and buried it. That just kind of set the tone. And from that on, that jump started an 18-4 run that effectively ended the game.
Mm-hmm.
Look, there's going to be games, like you said, with the 16 get the upset last year over one. We saw in 3 of the 4 games this year where they led. 2 of them led at halftime, and North Dakota State led Duke for a majority of that first half.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to happen more often now. They have more belief. They have nothing to lose. And especially if you play late at night, just because Carolina just wasn't ready to play. And that happens when you waited all day to play. But, we'll go ahead and just move into the preview of Washington. And, we're going to be quite frank. We both were kind of preparing more to play Utah State just because Utah State seemed to be a better team, more physical, not as gifted as Washington, but they just seemed to be more sound, and the Huskies took it to them and got a relatively easy win in the round of 64 to move on to face Carolina. You mentioned they play the zone. That kind of mirrors what Syracuse does with the 2-3, so they're going to want to slow the game down, make it a half-court game, and do a really good job of taking Carolina out of the paint and making Carolina take a lot of three-point shots. They're led by Jalen Noel, who was the Pac-12 Player of the Year, and which kind of says something about that conference because Washington hasn't had that type of a player since Isaiah Thomas, and that's been almost a decade ago. Just another proof that this year was really down, but this team, all in all, maybe they're a lot better than what we thought they were going into the tournament.
I think so. I'm not really sure what to think of the performance from Utah State. I thought that team would dominate them inside, and they just simply not. I mean, Washington, I think the zone may have bothered them a little bit, probably because they haven't seen a zone that much out in the Mountain West Conference. Also don't think they've really seen that level of player outside of maybe Nevada, and I don't really know. I mean, here's the thing that I really don't like about Washington, and I didn't like about them coming in. I think the Pac-12 was one of the worst conferences. It's definitely the worst major conference, and I think there were some mid-major conferences that were better than it by a large margin. I thought the American Athletic Conference was a lot better than them overall, and really it was just a down year. But at the same time, you can't take these guys lightly. He coached under Jim Boeheim, as I mentioned a little while ago, and so he does have, he comes from a coaching tree that is very experienced in the NCAA tournament. And, I mean, you mentioned it. I mean, yeah, it was a down year, but whenever you have the player of the year in a conference, that really tells you that this team, they're really not that bad. But, for the most part, I think, again, Carolina has the most talent out of the two teams that are going to be on the court. No one's going to debate that. Carolina showed that, look, I mean, we didn't really know what the status of Leaky Black and Sterling Manley was going to be. Now, Sterling didn't play until very late in the game, but he did play, so we know if needed, he's available. And then Leaky Black actually played some significant minutes there in that first half, mostly due to foul trouble, and I also think really just due to the lack of energy from the guys. I think that was one of those moments where Roy threw a guy in to try to energize everybody. I think it kind of worked a little bit because they pretty much – I think they told the team, look, we're going to play anybody that we have to try to win this game. But – looking at Washington, You mentioned Noel, who I think is, if you look, is easily their best player. Noah Dickinson inside, also averages 12 a game, 7 rebounds per game. But overall, a team that actually statistically is a worse rebounding team than Iona. They averaged 1.6 rebounds per game. And really their shooting numbers are very similar to Iona as well. Now, Noel is a great three-point shooter, shoots it at a 44.7% clip. And, I mean, he's taken 114 three-point shots. Not a ton, but still a decent amount of shots to get a good read on what kind of three-point shooter he is. So, I think this is a team that, could give us a little bit of trouble here for a little while. Look, Carolina struggled in these second-round games. The last 2 times that they've won the national championship, the second round has not been easy. Now, they faced SEC opponents in both of those. And the thing about Arkansas was they were speeding you up. That LSU team back in 2009, I think, was probably one of the more underrated teams in the tournament, and Carolina was without Ty Lawson in that game. So there were different circumstances. This game, Carolina's about as fully healthy as they were going to be entering this tournament. Not completely fully healthy, of course, but I still think Carolina's got the talent and got the depth to be able to handle a Washington team that really goes about 6 deep, maybe 7 if they want to extend it, and is a team that, granted, won the regular season at Pac-12 conference, but really towards the end of the year was on a bit of a slide. I think Carolina is going to go in as the favorite. I think the guy that really steps up and has a good game, I think Luke May has a good game because he really did not play that well against Iona. I mean, the second half was better from him, but still wasn't really all that great. And I think this is one of those moments where he realizes as a senior leader it's time to step up against a team in Washington that may give you some fits. I think going inside, that's always helped when we're able to get post touches inside. That opens up the outside shooting game. So I think when he has his moments down low, he'll be able to hit the jump shots necessary, maybe even finish a couple of times down low at the rim and get to the free throw line. So I think he has a fantastic game. And I wanted to say something about Nazir Little. I think you're right. He played fantastic in that game against Iona. That's probably his best performance of the entire season. And the main thing, you mentioned it. A lot of people are probably going to say, well, he needs to perform as he did in that game the other night. If he's not scoring 15 or more points every night, then we're probably not in a great position. He really doesn't. I mean, as long as he scores probably in between that 8 to 10 point range that you were talking about as a 6-man off the bench, I think he'll be okay. Show that effort defensively like you showed last night, especially in the second half. And I really like the fact that he was getting out on the fast break, something that we really haven't seen a ton from him, throughout this season. I thought he did a fantastic job in the open court last night and was part of the reason why Carolina was able to pull away so easily. So if he can bring those type of minutes off the bench, I think that would be huge for Carolina. But Luke May's the guy I'm going with in this game against Washington.
Yeah, it's no surprise on this podcast we're going to mention the rebounding as the key to what Carolina is going to do.
Stunning.
Washington is I think I saw the set, they're like 326 out of 351 or 53 Division I teams in rebounding, and Carolina's first. So I think as long as Carolina is what they need to do in that area, they rebound the ball the way they're supposed to, they could overcome a bad shooting night. Or maybe a high turnover game if this zone, because the thing about Washington, Roy mentioned it today in this presser, they're going to trap a lot more in the corners as opposed to what Syracuse will do. And so that's something we got to be prepared for. But if Carolina rebounds the ball the way that they're supposed to, I think that'll be the thing that determines whether you win or lose. It's kind of like in the NFL in the playoffs, whichever team only runs the ball in January wins playoff games. Well, in March, whichever team rebounds the ball better most times is going to win. And I think that's what Carolina's going to do. I'm with you. I think Luke May's going to have a nice bounce that game. And we're going to need him to be because of, we need his production both scoring and on glass. But I think the main key is going to be, I think we're going to see a better Kobe White. I thought the other night he kind of looked a little bit more like a freshman, playing a little bit too fast at times, taking some questionable shots. And that's just the nerves of being a freshman point guard in an NCAA game, which we haven't had since Marcus Page's freshman year. It's been quite a while since we've had to deal with that, and I think you'll see a much more settled Toby run the offense a little bit more, take better shots, and get the ball where it needs to go, and lead Carolina. I think the team's actually going to be a little bit closer than what we think. I mean, I think it's going to be a 8 to 12 point kind of win, which
I see that.
I think a lot of, that's kind of what I think it's going to be. Get the game into the 70s. If Carolina gets this game into the 70s, Washington's going to be hard-pressed to score enough to keep up with them. Normally it's in the 80s, as what I normally like to tell people, but as much as Washington has had problems scoring the ball this year, put the game in the 70s and give me the Carolina to advance to the Sweet 16.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that. That's right in the same area where I would be. I'd say probably maybe a little bit more, maybe in that 12 to 15 point range wouldn't really shock me, but I think that 8 to 12 point range is actually kind of where the game's going to be, because it is going to be a low scoring affair. I know they scored 78 against Utah State. I feel like we're probably a better defensive team than Utah State. I haven't watched much of Utah State, so that's the reason I say probably. The numbers prove that we are a better team defensively than Utah State. So I think it's going to be a low-scoring game because they're going to want to slow the pace down. And that's the other thing. You've got to control the pace. Whenever you get in these games where the styles are so different, whoever controls the pace is the team that has the best chance of winning. We've had games where the pace has been controlled by the other team and we've still won. But for the most part, especially in the tournament, you've got to be able to control the pace of the game. If Carolina does that, I think they'll be okay.
Yeah, I'm totally agreeing with you, and I guess we're going to find out tomorrow, roughly around 2:40, 2:45ish, and see, what this team has as to build off of the round of 64 win, and hopefully we advance to the Sweet 16 after last year's round of 32 early exit. So that's all we're going to do here tonight for the Roy's Boys podcast. I want to thank Anthony for joining me and giving me some great insights as we break down this team's potential deep tournament run. You know where to find the podcast. We're on Spreaker, iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, as well as the blog. You can find the blog on Medium.com, Facebook, and Twitter. Well, thank you guys for listening. Go Tar Heels.